Hello everyone, I'm Jeff Greenewalt, and I'm posting this video on July 1st, 2023, the 160th anniversary of the events that led to the writing of this song, Children of the Battlefield. The story behind the song starts with a young man named Amos Humiston. Amos was born April 26, 1830, in Owego, New York. And at first, Amos studied the craft of harness making and always assumed he would be a harness maker, but he changed his mind. And at the age of 20 years, he signed on to the crew of a whaling ship. He was what was called a green hand, which meant someone who had never been to sea before. And he sailed upon the ship Harrison. It was captained by John Hathaway. And the voyage lasted for almost 3.5 years. When he returned, Amos decided, maybe whaling wasn't for him. Amos decided to return to harness making, and he soon met a young woman named Philinda Smith while she was visiting relatives. They had a rather whirlwind romance, and they were married on the 4th of July of 1854. Now, Amos and Philinda began raising a family. Their son Franklin was born in 1855. They had a daughter, Alice, in 1857, and a second son named Frederick was born in 1859. By the time Frederick was born, Amos and Philinda were living in Portville, New York, and Amos opened a harness shop there with a partner named George Lilly. When the Civil War broke out, Amos did not enlist immediately. However, when Abraham Lincoln issued his call for 300,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion on July 1st of 1862, Amos thought he could no longer ignore the country's peril. He received assurances from his neighbors they would help to care for his family in his absence. So Amos enlisted on July 26th of 1862. And on September 24th of that year, he was mustered in as corporal of Company C of the 154th New York Regiment. Those letters that he sent home to Philinda expressed both the willingness to do battle with the enemy in order to save his country and also longing for his family. Well, I suppose that was rather like so many other soldiers in the Civil War. The 154th New York, Amos's regiment, was part of the 11th Corps of the Army of the Potomac. Amos's regiment participated in General Ambrose Burnside's infamous Mud March, where the Army became hopelessly stuck in Virginia mud in the early part of 1863. And shortly after the Mud March, Amos received a promotion to sergeant. Amos's regiment suffered horribly at the beginning of May of 1863 at the Battle of Chancellorsville. The 154th New York received the full weight of the Confederate flank attack while conducting a forlorn hope to cover the retreat of the rest of the 11th Corps. The 154th suffered 40% casualties. Amos himself was struck by a bullet, but he was fortunate since the bullet that hit him in the ribs just above the heart was a spent bullet, so he survived. Well, the Chancellorsville campaign was a complete disaster for the Army of the Potomac. However, Philinda lifted Amos's spirits by sending him a very special present. He wrote, "I got the likeness of the children, and it pleased me more than anything you could have sent to me." These were his 3 very beloved children, and this is the picture. On July 1st, 1863, the 154th New York marched rapidly to the Evergreen Cemetery in Gettysburg. It was one of the regiments that General Oliver Otis Howard wanted to hold on Cemetery Hill to preserve it as a fallback position for the troops fighting in Gettysburg. The Confederates were overwhelming the U.S. troops, and General Howard was receiving pleas for reinforcements. At first, General Howard did not send troops from Cemetery Hill as reinforcements since he planned to hold the hill at all costs. Finally, as the pleas continued, General Howard relented, and he let one brigade, under the command of Colonel Charles Coster, rush to the north end of Gettysburg to provide cover for the retreating 11th Corps. Coster's brigade included Amos's regiment, and Amos soon found that the assignment was another forlorn hope. As soon as he and his comrades reached John Coons's brickyard on the north side of Gettysburg, they were faced with an attack by two large Confederate brigades. They were outnumbered approximately 3-1. As part of Coster's brigade began to collapse, Lieutenant Jack Mitchell from Amos's Company C called out, "Boys, let's stay right here." They had the intention of still trying to put up a fight. However, in a moment, they discovered that it was hopeless, and the next call was, "Boys, we must get out of here." And their company broke and ran towards Cemetery Hill. But poor Amos, well, he didn't get very far. In this portion of the video, I'm showing the site of the Brickyard fight as it appears today. And this monument is the monument to the 154th New York Regiment. And I'm standing shooting this video right about the spot where Amos might well have stood. Now, of course, everything looks very different today than it did in 1863. And eventually, Amos retreated. Here is the famous mural painted by Mark Dunkelman and Johann Biermann. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. I had the pleasure of meeting Mark Dunkelman a couple of years ago when I was doing some programs down at the Gettysburg train station. Very nice man. And I want to thank him for helping to preserve the story of Amos Humiston and the picture of his 3 children. Well, this is a picture of John Coons's house with an artillery shell embedded in it as it looks today, and Amos probably would have seen that house going into the brickyard and possibly coming out as well. Well, Amos apparently fell mortally wounded along Stratton Street, and while he was dying, he must have reached into a pocket and pulled out the picture of his 3 children and was looking at that picture when death came. A young girl found Amos's body and was moved by his sightless eyes still staring at the picture of his beloved children. This girl was the daughter of Benjamin Shriver, a local tavern keeper, and Benjamin posted the picture in his tavern hoping someone would recognize these 3 children so they could identify this poor man who his daughter found. A group of 4 men stopped by the tavern, saw the picture, and heard the story behind it. One of those men was a physician, Dr. John Francis Bourne from Philadelphia. He was in Gettysburg treating wounded soldiers, and he decided to make identifying this soldier his personal mission. So he persuaded the tavern keeper to give him the photograph. And the first thing that Dr. Bourne did was to make certain that a well-marked grave contained the remains of poor Amos Humiston. And then he had copies of the ambrotype of the 3 children made. Amos's story and the story of the picture of his 3 children touched the hearts of people in the northern states. And people wanted a copy of the picture. So Dr. Bourne had quite a few copies of the original ambrotype made. And he began to sell them, and he kept the money for the benefit of Philinda Humiston once she was identified. Well, he then persuaded the Philadelphia Inquirer to publish a description of the picture along with the story behind it, because this was before newspapers could print photographs. So the Philadelphia Inquirer not only printed the story, the The folks at the Enquirer were kind enough to share the story with other newspapers, and one that picked it up was the American Presbyterian. The story in the American Presbyterian ran on October 29th of 1863, and a short time later, Dr. Bourne received a letter from the postmaster in Portville, New York, writing on behalf of Philinda Humiston. Philinda thought that the description fit her children, and while Amos wrote to her frequently, she received nothing from him since the Battle of Gettysburg. So Dr. Bourne sent one of the copies of the pictures to Portville to Philinda, and I can only imagine what went through her heart when she saw the picture of her own children that confirmed the death of her dear husband. At least before that, she had some hope, and now she knew for certain that poor Amos was gone. Well, Dr. Bourne then delivered personally the blood-stained photograph taken from Amos's hands, and the American Presbyterian sponsored a contest for the best poem written about Amos's story. James G. Clark won the competition with his poem that is set to music, Children of the Battlefield. And profits of the song went to the support and education of the Humiston children. And now here is my rendition of Children of the Battlefield. To support me and allow me to provide more content, please click on subscribe. And if you like the video, please click on like. Thanks.
Upon the field of Gettysburg, the summer sun was high, when freedom met her haughty foe beneath a northern sky. Among the heroes of the North who swelled her grand array, and rushed like mountain eagles forth from happy homes away, there stood a man of humble fame, a sire of children three, and pressed within a little frame their pictured form to see. And blame him not if in the strife he breathed a soldier's prayer. Oh, Father, shield the soldier's wife, and for his children care, and for his children care. Upon the field of Gettysburg, the morning shone again. The crimson sound of battle burst in streams of fiery rain. Our legions quelled the awful flood of shot and steel and shell, while banners marked with ball and blood around them rose and fell, and none more nobly won the name of champion of the free than he who pressed the little frame that held his children three. And none were braver in the strife than he who breathed a prayer. Oh, Father, shield the soldier's wife, and for his children care, and for his children care. Gettysburg, the full moon slowly rose. She looked and saw 10,000 brows, all pale in death's repose. And down beside a silver stream, from other forms away, calm as a warrior in a dream, our fallen comrade lay. His limbs were cold, his sightless eyes were fixed upon the three sweet stars that rose in memory's sky to light him o'er the sea. Then honored be the soldier's life, and hallowed be his prayer. O Father, shield the soldier's wife, and for his children care, and for his children care.
Once identified, Amos was buried in the soldiers' cemetery at Gettysburg, along with his name. His 3 children, Frank, Alice, and Fred, decorated their father's grave with flowers when they arrived in Gettysburg. They were coming to Gettysburg in order to live at the Gettysburg homestead, along with Felinda. The Gettysburg homestead existed due to an effort by Dr. Bourne when he created the National Orphans Homestead Association. Sunday schools and individuals made contributions to the association, and that organization used the funds to construct the home. And this is a picture of what is left of that home today. And children and widows of the war dead for a number of years got back on their feet at the Gettysburg homestead. It did some very good things. Unfortunately, its end was less than honorable. Years after Felinda and her children left, the new headmistress, named Rosa Carmichael, was accused of abusing the children and otherwise mismanaging the homestead. And it turned out, unfortunately, to be true. And Rosa Carmichael's misdeeds brought an end to the Gettysburg homestead. Well, to help conclude the story, the Humiston children, when they grew up, they shunned public attention to the story behind the picture of the 3 of them. Well, I hope you enjoyed my rendition of Children of the Battlefield and you enjoyed the story behind it. This is one of the most heart-rendering stories during the Battle of Gettysburg. So thank you so much for watching, and please do take care. By the way, please check out my friends at Gettysgear, either when you're in Gettysburg or online, and also check out the Hub, their performance venue behind the store where I can often be seen performing.